Let's start with a quick review of the even versus odd functions. Even functions have an algebraic relationship where if you're calculating f of x, that will equal the same thing as f of negative x, which means that if you plug in the x value into the function, you will get the exact same answer if you plug in the opposite of that x value. Graphically, the graph of even functions are symmetric about the y-axis, which again just means that the y-axis is that line of symmetry. Odd functions have a relationship algebraically if you start with the opposite of the x value and plug that in, that will be the same thing as the opposite of the entire function plugging in the regular x value. The odd functions graphically are symmetric about the origin. That's a little bit harder to see. There's not like a line of symmetry, but if you rotate the right side of this graph here around, it would match up with the left side of the graph perfectly. And that's a quick review for your even functions versus your odd functions. We're going to spend the next couple minutes here going over the difference algebraically, or how to check algebraically if a function is even, odd, or neither, because it certainly does not have to fit into one of these categories. Okay, we're going to start with the function f of x equals negative 2x cubed plus x. When we are deciding if a function is odd, even, or neither, these are the three relationships algebraically that we're going to be looking at and comparing. We need a plain f of x, the f of negative x, so plugging in the opposite of that number, and then really taking this answer here from the green and just making it the opposite of it. So we should not have to recalculate anything to get this purple answer down here, as long as we have the green one to begin with. In order to start this, we're going to have to pick an x value to plug in. In yesterday's notes, we were dealing with given x equals 4 and x equals negative 6. That's just two random numbers. You can pick any number you want. I'm just going to pick x equals 2, and that's the numbers that I'm going to be plugging in to calculate f of x, or f of 2, f of negative 2, and then I'm going to take the opposite of the answer again that we get up here in green, and then I will compare those answers. Now that I calculated f of 2 to be negative 14, so f of x, because that's the x2 is the x value I chose, f of x equals negative 14, I can actually jump down here to purple and quickly just write down that, well, if the f of x equals negative 14, then the opposite of f of x is positive 14, and that part is done. Now I will need to calculate f of the opposite of x, which will be negative 2. Alright, so for f of negative 2, I calculated positive 14, which means the f of negative x is equal to 14, and the opposite of f of x is equal to 14. So because, and I'm going to write this out because this is going to be my justification, because f of the opposite of x is equal to the opposite of f of x, this function is odd. And that's going to be how we decide if it's odd, even, or neither. I'm going to do one more for you, and then you'll have some time to do some on your own. Okay, alright, so just a quick recap of how I'm going to get started here. These are the three things that I need to figure out: f of x, f of the opposite of x, and the opposite of f of x. I am choosing x equals 2 simply because it's not a really large number, but it's also not really small, where something like a 1 or 0 may not be able to actually help me differentiate between these three answers. So I'm just picking something a little bit different. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate these things. You're going to see me do f of x first, then quickly find the opposite of f of x, and then go back and figure out the f of the opposite of x. So after running the calculations, it looks like f of x is equal to the f of negative x. So when I plugged in 2 and negative 2, I got the exact same answer. The opposite of f of x is positive 64, so that does not equal the negative 64. So because this relationship exists, the function is even. I hope you were successful on those last couple practice problems. Please make sure you ask me if you have any questions, and we'll go ahead and get you started on the next piece.